Let's rock. I would like to thank you very much. This is the episode number 2 of our how-to series that we're preparing on real-life cases with Portainer. This is how to automate app deployment using Portainer and Git. And for that, we have several tools that we're going to show. For those who missed our first episode, please visit our channel in YouTube and you will see how to series episode 1, where we talked about how to build a secure environment for the Kubernetes orchestrator and also other functions that you can do with the Kubernetes environment within Portainer. And we like to emphasize the easy way, because the idea is to remove complexity when it comes to using Portainer and Docker or Kubernetes. And here, the idea is to, by the end of this webinar, you have at least a basic understanding of the Git integration that we have with Portainer, basic idea of Portainer APIs, how to use them, and also I'm going to do a quick demonstration of how to use webhooks with Docker Swarm in Portainer. And for this, we have our special guest, Tobias Fenster. He's one of our Portainer ambassadors, and he's gonna give us his testimonial on his daily use of Portainer, especially when it comes to the features of Portainer with the Git integration and the usage of the APIs. So the interesting thing is that with this special guest, we're gonna see it's not just a demonstration, but it's going to be like a real demonstration, because it's going to show how effectively, although in a development environment, how he would deploy this or how he's deploying this in the production environments he works with on a day-to-day basis. So without further ado, I pass on the bastion here to Tobias. Tobias, thank you very much. Welcome to this webinar. And if you could just please give us a quick intro on your experience. Oh, just before that, I'm sorry, I forgot to also introduce here Michael Cooper from Portainer. He's our product engineer. He's going to be helping us with the Q&A, so you can bombard him in the chat box with as many questions as you like, because he's an ace. He's extremely accurate with his answers. And finally, for those who are joining, and if you would like to also introduce yourselves in the chat box and where you're from, that would be really, really nice. Thank you very much. So Tobias, again, back to you, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great pleasure to be here. As you said, I'm using Portainer on a daily basis. The company I work for, Cosmo Consult, we created a service that is setting this up using Portainer, setting a service up using Portainer. I'm the CTO there, but also leading a development team that is creating a containerized service. And there I'll try to show you what we're actually doing in a production environment. I don't want to make an update in a production environment live in a webinar, so I'll use a dev environment for that, but I'll certainly show you how it works in our production environment, as well as how we do it when the update actually happens.
Cool, thank you. It's best just to show the real thing.
Yeah.
Because and I'll just end with the webhook. That is something that I understand you won't be demonstrating, so I will demonstrate the webhook capabilities of Portainer.
Okay, so basically, to give you just an idea of what we're doing, as I said, we are providing a containerized service. This is used by our product development teams, as well as the teams that are implementing our products on the customer side. So it's both product development experts and project teams that are doing consulting, that are doing development, project management, and so on. And they are all using those services. And the reason why we're doing what we're doing with Portainer is that we are pushing out updates, but we don't want to update them without their consent, so to speak, because basically they might be right before a go live, they might be right before a critical release they are creating. So we don't want to make that change at exactly that moment, but allow them the control to make the change themselves. So basically, for all the companies that are using our services, they're able to make the decision themselves when they want to do the update. And until Portainer came out with that feature, we had like an explanation how they need to log on which machine, what scripts they needed to run, and so on. And it basically only took like 5 or 7 minutes, and it was kind of easy and it worked well, but still it felt like not an ideal way to do it. So we also looked into creating something by our own, but then we noticed that Portainer was planning to do something. We decided to wait for it, and it actually works very well. So basically the scenario is that someone who is an administrator for one of the companies that is using our service, they want to go in and do an update for the service. What we as the development team that is creating that service are doing is we're pushing the definition into a Git repository so they can take it from there. And to show you what I'm talking about, I'll just gonna log in to Portainer here. By the way, you can see the new SSO feature also, that is also something that works great. So you can see this is a Docker Swarm. It has roughly 100 containers that are up and running. So this is one of our production environments. And if I select that one, I can select the stack, because the feature that we're looking at is a stack that is Git-based in a Git-based deployment. And you can see here, this is the stack that I'm talking about, the Docker automation stack. And if I click on that one, you can see the new interface that is made for deploying a stack. And this is the interface, how it looks like if the stack is already deployed and I can do an update here. So you can see here that it is referenced in this particular Git repo hosted on GitHub. And I'll just copy and paste that and open it here. You won't be able to access this yourself. This is a private repo because this is, as I said, built on building our own services. But here I have a stack folder, a Docker automation subfolder, and in here there is a Docker Compose file. And that is used to define the service that we're creating. It has a couple of different services, what we call Azure DevOps automation. Then it has the Docker automation. It has agents for the Docker automation. It has a lot of configuration. As you can see here, we're using traffic as a reverse proxy. We have a lot of volumes that we're mounting. We have environment variables, networks, and so on. So basically, it's not terribly complicated, but also not trivial configuration file. We can store it on Git and then share it with the different companies that are using our services, because they have access to the same repo as well. Now, if we do an update, let's say we move the Azure DevOps automation from 0.11.25 to 0.11.26, we would make a change here. If we have the Docker automation, move it from 0.11.17.12 to 0.11.18, we would make a change here, just commit that, push that into the repo, and let everyone know that they can use it. And what they then would do, they would go into Portainer and then just click on pull and redeploy. They also need to authenticate. I would need to put in a username and a password to do the re-authentication, and I'll show you in a second in our dev environment how this works. Also, in a future version of Portainer, this will be stored by container, so you don't have to always re-edit. But if I then click on pull and redeploy, it would download the version of the Docker Compose file, the definition of the stack with the new versions, and then deploy the new versions of the images into the stack, into our swarm, and we would have the update up and running. So basically, as I said before, the process that we had in place before required them to log into a VM, set up the SSH keys, run a script, and so on. And again, it wasn't terribly complicated, but now it literally is a couple of clicks, pull and redeploy, and they are up and running again, and they have the latest version. So this is really great because on the one hand side, we can completely control the environments because everything is built on top of that Docker Compose file that is in the Git repo. We always know what people are using. And for the local administrators who need to create the update, it really is only a couple of clicks, entering a username and a password for now. In the future, that is even stored. And then we can very easily roll it out. even if we do some canary deployments, or sometimes we do a green-blue deployment, then we could also enter a different branch here, let people have access to a preview release or a different version or whatever. And that also makes it very easy for us to have different kinds of configurations and different kinds of deployments to roll them out. If I click on the editor here, you can see the exact same file. So I also, if I want, can make manual changes here. But if I later go in here and say pull and redeploy, I'll do this once just to show you the message here. It tells me that any changes that I made locally will be overridden. So if someone even goes in here, makes a change, or we tell them to make a change because we want to test something or whatever, as soon as they do the redeployment, we always know they're in a clean state, they're on the same version that we want to have.
So Tobias, this is an interesting feature, because eventually, if you're working in a very secure environment where you do not have access to the Git repository for whatever reason, you can do changes manually and then eventually store them separately in a different file and commit them later on to your proper Git repository if you want, right? So yeah, this is very cool. This is very cool.
Yeah. Something else that I'd like to point out is, as I said, it's all very, very similar, very standardized, but at the same time, there are of course differences between the different environments. To give you an idea what that looks like is, if I go in here, you can see a couple of environment variables. For example, we need to know the name, we need to know the DNS. We have a configuration setting that knows whether this is something that is internally in our company, or if this is something that we are providing for a customer. And then we have a cleanups thing that is cleaning up images, and that has basically an amount of gigabytes when it starts running. So those are the kinds of configurations that you can have. And if we check back into the Git file, into the Docker Compose file in the Git repo, you can see, for example, here where such an environment variable is referenced. I'll try to make that a bit bigger. So this is the Cosmo internal environment variable, and in Portainer, I have that one set to true. So that means that when it's up and running, it should be set to true. Let's check. This was the Azure DevOps Automation current service. If I go in here, take a look at the services, and there are a lot, so it's slightly slow. We have the Azure DevOps Automation current service. And if I take a look at the environment variables, you can see here we have the Cosmo internal, which is set to true. So basically, we have that option also to have a standardized way, but also to have it configurable. So that way we can make the necessary changes between the different environments, differentiation between production, non-production, differentiation between based on names and so on. And that also makes it very easy for us to make those kind of changes. So this is how it looks like as soon as it is deployed. You might also ask, how are you getting this into the system initially? And there we can, of course, create a new stack. If I go to stack and say add stack, and then say git repo, I could put in all the information here. But when we create a new environment, we're using infrastructure as code tools. We're using Terraform, but you could use something else to be able to completely automatically update or create a new environment. And of course, we also want the deployment that you can see here to run completely automated. So basically, we're just running a script or running a build pipeline when we need a new environment, and it's fully automated. That we have the full deployment. So we needed to find a way to do this initial deployment of the Git repo also in an automated way. And fortunately, Portainer has an API that we can use for this. And I want to walk you through the steps that we do to do that initial deployment. So what I'm going to do here is I'm using Visual Studio Code and a plugin for that called REST Client, which allows us to do some REST calls in here. This in reality we're doing with a PowerShell script because as I said, I want to run this automated, but to show you how it works, I'm just using the REST client so I can explain what I'm doing. The first thing that you need to do when you want to interact with an API is, of course, you need to do authentication. For that, I'm calling the auth endpoint, and the base URL you can see up here. this is where I can reach the API. And for the authentication, I need a username and a password. I'll send the request. And as an answer, I get this JWT token, which allows me to do the login. The next thing that I need to do in my specific case is I need the ID of the swarm. For that, I'm doing another call that you can see here. I'm sending a request to a specific endpoint, and I'm asking it for the swarm information. And if I send that one, I get an invalid token. That's not good. What am I missing? Oh, I deleted something for clarity, and I obviously deleted too much. Okay, sorry. That one is defining the token. I need this. Let me try again and try to get the swarm ID. Now I have it. So I'm sending this to that endpoint and getting the swarm information. And part of the swarm information is the ID of the swarm. Now I have all information that I need, and I can do the actual deployment. So what is now happening is that we're deploying the stack. For that, I need the information that we've provided before. So to switch back to the GUI, you can see here, I need information like where is the repository, what is the branch that you want to use, where can I find the file in the repository, what is needed for authentication, and I need to provide the same information for the API. So this is basically the path of the file in the repository, exactly as it says. I need a name. I need to tell it that I want to use authentication. This is a variable that has my password. This tells it what branch I want to use. This is the repository. This is my username. And also I need to let it know the swarm ID. This is something that we've just created. And as you've seen before, we are also using environment variables, and I can easily plug them in as well, as you can see here. So this is just an array where I put in the swarm name, the information, whether it's internal or not, the external DNS name, and that cleanup thing that I mentioned before. So just to show you before I call it, I'll log into the test environment that I'm using here. And as you can see, we're using the business edition over here. And I'll select it. It basically has almost nothing running. It only has that base stack, but not the Docker automation stack. And if I take a look at the service, it's only Portainer and then basically traffic in a different Windows version. So if I now go back in here and make that call through the API to deploy my stack, to have that in an automated way, I'll send it. And this typically takes a couple of seconds. Let's see. And then at some point it will start to appear in here. Not yet. Those are always the interesting seconds in a live demo.
Yeah, like, oh my God, is it gonna work? Right?
Yeah, and here we get the 200 okay. So it tells me, okay, I've created a stack called automation and all the information that I provided. And if we now go back in here, in the list of stacks, now we have the automation stack. So I can take a look, and now we have everything as defined previously. We have it in place, it works. We have all the different services, we have all the different configurations. If I go back into the editor, you can also see that we have the environment variables with the names and so on.
Yeah, isn't this cool? I mean, I think this type of integration is amazing. It does reduce the deployment time and also the fail-safe deployment of stacks in an amazing manner. This is amazing. And I see that you're running this in a Windows environment, right? I mean, and this is something also that I think is really cool about Portainer. Regardless of what environment you're running on, if that is on the underlying environment is a Windows environment or a Linux environment, I mean, the interface is the same, the functionality is the same. You could be doing, actually, you could even be at some point just obviously changing the proper parameters, migrating this to a proper Linux server if you needed to, right? Just by using this interface.
Yeah. And the other dimension, of course, is, as I said, or you said, I think, and as people have seen, we're using Docker Swarm right now. but maybe in the future we'll move over to Kubernetes, because I mean, it's kind of clear where the industry is going. We have a couple of blockers and things we need to change to be able to move there. But one thing that we know we will just keep using as is, and the users will probably see almost no difference, is Portainer, because it just works the same. It's fine, and they can just get easily up and running again, even if we change the orchestrator.
Yeah, I'm going to show right after your demonstration how this can be done with Kubernetes very quickly. And again, the impressive thing about it is that the interface is practically the same, right?
Yeah.
There's hardly any difference with, actually, there's a little added bonus when it comes to Kubernetes that I'll leave that as a surprise when I show that part on Kubernetes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so just one last thing that I wanted to show you now is actually the real update. We just deployed it, so there's no actual change, but just to show you how it would look like, I'll enter my username and I need to copy and paste my password. And then I can just say pull and redeploy, accept the update. And with that, it's just running. We won't see a change because it's exactly the same version as it was before. But just to show you how easy this is, how easy it is for an administrator to fetch the update and get up and running again on a new version. It's extremely simple. As I said, right now they need to input the username and the password, but that will change in the future as well. And then it's really very, very simple for someone to do that deployment. And with that, we're already no, I don't want to update the password. With that, we are already up and running. We would have new versions if the definition in the Git repo would have changed.
Yeah, perfect. Right, Tobias, this is amazing. This is really, really cool.
Yeah.
And
we got the exactly same feedback from our administrators. They were very happy when they understood they didn't need to fiddle with files and that kind of thing anymore.
And that's another really key thing about Portainer, right? There's hardly any code when it comes to using Portainer involved, unless obviously you have a YAML file, be that a Docker Compose or a YAML manifest on Kubernetes. Well, obviously that's another story. But within Portainer per se, even the administration of your services and your containers, it's pretty much done everything using a graphic interface, right? And very quickly, and not only quickly, but in an easy manner and in a safe manner. So that's one of the key things I really like about Portainer. Thank you, Tobias. Is there anything else you would like to, I mean, this was amazing. This was an amazing demo. Is there anything else you would like to show?
No, I think for the updates, that's it. It really isn't that complicated. It took a bit to figure out how the initial deployment worked, but by now the documentation is a lot better. It has a great example, so I think people should be able to get up and running. Oh, maybe just one more comment. What I also tried in the login here, because we are using OAuth, I tried to use an OAuth token with Azure AD, and that doesn't currently work. So at the moment, you need to do username and password based login, but I think that's also on the roadmap for the future.
Yes.
That is something that you need to be aware of if you get started with the API and you're wondering how to log in and trying to use OAuth SSO with something like Azure AD, then this won't work for the moment. But yeah, as you can see here, it's not that complicated.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we're on the works of also enabling tokens in terms of open authentication. So yeah, great. Tobias, thank you so much. Yeah, I'd be glad to have you here. I don't know if you have any time constraints, but if you want to continue here with us, it'd be a great honor and pleasure.
I'll certainly do so. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yes, no, it's always a pleasure and an honor, actually. Actually, I have a question for you before I continue. Tobias Historic is asking you if you integrate API calls in a GitLab GitHub CI.
No, what we're doing is we're running a pipeline in Azure DevOps that would be very similar in GitLab as well, or on GitHub Actions, doesn't matter. And then we're running a Terraform script, and that in turn is doing the API call. So we're not doing it directly, but it's really a very simple REST API call. So the technology actually shouldn't matter. You need to find a way how you can manage the login and handle the secrets, but everything else really is very basic REST calls that should work fine.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Tobias, once more, thank you very much. I'm going to now share my screen and show a little bit of magic that we also do here with Portainer, not only with Docker, as you just showed, but also with Kubernetes, right? So currently, and here I'm showing the business edition of Portainer. I have 3 endpoints. The basic Docker endpoint where I'm running Portainer actually, a Docker Swarm where I'm going to show webhooks, how we use webhooks with Docker Swarm. But I also have a Kubernetes endpoint, and I want to show something very interesting in terms of Kubernetes. So here in the Kubernetes endpoint, I can also have deployments using the Git integration. So typically, if you want to use, let's say, the standard application of deployment with Kubernetes or Docker Swarm, you just click on Add Application. You fill in the form where you would set up the name, the image, a specific namespace if you have one, a specific stack if you want to have this in a specific stacks, etc. And just fill in these variables, environment variables, so on and so forth, and click on deploy. That's let's say is like the very easy and traditional way of deploying applications with Portainer. But if you have for instance, a YAML manifest, a Kubernetes YAML manifest that you have hosted on a Git server, and we say Git server because, well, the most popular and most used is GitHub, obviously, but we also support Git compliant technologies like GitLab or Bitbucket or even Git if you use like a home, or I think Gogs also, as long as it's Git compliant in terms of functionality, you can connect Portainer to any of those, right? And here, as you can see in this, I'm using a Kubernetes endpoint, and it's pretty much the same interface when you're deploying this on a Docker Swarm stack or even on a Docker stack, right? You can also integrate a deployment with a Git technology, pretty much filling in the same information that Tobias just demonstrated, the repository URL, the repository reference, and the manifest path, right? And here, given that we're using the Kubernetes manifest format, it's already suggesting the deployment.yaml. Now, the little surprise I wanted to show you, and it's something that I'm sure Tobias will make use when he starts going through the request, the client's request of migrating to Kubernetes, is that we can support the Docker Compose format here with Kubernetes. We use a utility that's called Compose, but starts with a K, that can convert from Docker Compose to the Kubernetes manifest format. So, for instance, if you want to test a migration of a stack or just an application that you have deployed with Docker, being that on Docker Swarm or regular Docker standalone environment, you can use Portainer to migrate this to Kubernetes easily. Currently, Docker Compose is one of the let's say most I wouldn't say promoted, but it's something that Docker is working strong on in terms of technology, and I think they're absolutely right, because I think it's an amazing concept in terms of container deployment especially for the Docker environment, right? And here we support this by being able to do this type of integration with Portainer, right? So this is something that is very interesting. And here you can select, for those who use Kubernetes, the proper namespaces to where you would deploy that specific stack or application, right? So as you can see, regardless of the orchestrator that you're using, we can do the same thing as what Tobias just demonstrated. In terms of APIs, you can go into our Swagger Hub, and you have a list of all the API calls that you can use, not only on Portainer Community Edition, but also on Portainer Business Edition. And here you see that not only we support Docker Hub in terms of API integration, we also have our edge capabilities that we will show in another episode, endpoint management, registries, and both Docker stacks, and both Docker and Kubernetes, right? Webhooks also, and pretty much everything that you need to integrate in terms of APIs that Tobias just showed with Portainer. So this is also a very interesting tool. You just need to in a search box look for Portainer API Swagger, and we'll take you to this page that has pretty much all of the APIs that we support and the versions that we are already have in terms of APIs that haven't changed much since this version 2.0.1. The APIs have been kept pretty much the same, right? And obviously in new functionalities, we will be updating this accordingly. But here you can see all the possibilities that you have in terms of Portainer API. So this is very interesting. So for instance, if you want to do automation and you have a deployment, be that on Docker or Swarm, Docker, or even Kubernetes, I have an example here of, I hope you can see my screen. Basically, we use a utility. Let me actually show you the page that we suggest, which is HTTP. HTTP, a lot of people use curl, but we strongly suggest HTTP for the use of our APIs. If you're going to use the APIs via command line, if it's not via some other integration. And here, for instance, is what you usually do. Well, I have this string here that is a bash string that pretty much pushes the authentication bearer that we need to use all sorts of possibilities in terms of Portainer API. So usually what I do is I store this token in a environment variable, call it JWT, and with HTTP I can, which is the HTTP actually utility, I can do several things. So in this case, I'm adding an endpoint, right? I'm adding a Kubernetes endpoint that is running on port 10.02.8, sorry, on the IP 10.0.2.8, and a port that I also retrieve via a script. And I'm telling Portainer here that that it can add this endpoint to this Kubernetes environment with the specific security strings, right? So if you need to, for instance, integrate a stack, you can use a scheduler. The most well-known scheduler in Linux is cron, where you can regularly run the pulling the token that changes. You have to make sure you always have a fresh new token. You pull the token, and you can run this cron-based, let's say, script using the Portainer API if you want to use full automation of your integration with Portainer, right? This is an example. Very soon in our next version, we will be able to have this via the interface, that you will have a button where you can deploy manually or automate your deployment, and it will do that regularly, meaning it will pull a Git server to see if there has been any changes in the latest deployment files or YAML files, and then you'll be able to automate your deployment. And Tobias, what he showed was that it's done manually, which is also an option. I understand that it really depends on how you have your team set up, because maybe you don't want to automate the deployment of a specific stack or branch for security reasons or stability reasons, or maybe there are in your development cycles situations where you have already tested that given compose file or YAML file, and you're sure that you can automate this, the changes into using this specific YAML file, so you can use the automation accordingly. So this is another interesting feature where you can use the APIs to do automation in terms of deployment with Git integration or even within Portainer, right? So yeah, and again, it's pretty much the same, right? If you're using Docker Swarm or even Docker, you go to stack, you add a stack, and you see that you have the same integration capabilities as you would have with Kubernetes. Obviously, it changes a bit because here we don't do the YAML to Docker Compose translation. You have other options, but it's pretty much the same as you would be if you would be using the Kubernetes Git integration. The same applies to Docker. If you want to deploy a stack and add a stack repository, absolutely the same thing. So this is what is interesting about Portainer. It helps you with a very similar interface use this integration with Git servers for your advanced deployments. Okay, so now I also want to show webhooks. I have here a Docker Swarm endpoint, and I'm going to add a service, add a MySQL database, SQL, and I'm going to pull image MySQL. It's already there, 5.7. Okay. I know I need to map port. So again, I'm here now doing the demonstration of webhooks with Portainer. And I'm here, when I deploy the service, I'm already going to select create a service webhook. I have a volume, already predefined volume already, that is called MySQL data local. I'm going to map it to, actually, you know what? I'm going to create a new volume because I'm not sure these are clean. Let me create a new volume first. So MySQL data, create a volume. I'm going to go to services. I have the service of MySQL. The image will be MySQL 5.7. I'm going to create a webhook. I'm going to add the volume I've just created to this service. I know that I have to set up an environment variable to be able to launch MySQL as a container. It's the MySQL root password. Excuse me. Okay, so let's see if I have everything I need. No, I'm missing the ports. Okay, 3306. Oops. 3306. That's the standard MySQL database port. Okay, so I'm going to create the service with the service webhook option. It won't take long because the image is already downloaded to my Docker environment. And as you can see, it's already running. And when I click on the MySQL service, I see that I have a link here, which is the service webhook. So I'm going to copy this link. And here I have a little HTML file that I'm hosting on a HTTP server. And I'm gonna show you very soon what this HTML file is. It's basically a form with two buttons where I paste the webhook link to be able to perform several actions, right? So if you want to integrate this with a CI/CD tool with Jenkins, you can do this, for instance, to integrate via Jenkins or any other CI/CD tool that you use using the Portainer webhooks capabilities. So here I'm going to just save these two for now and show you the page. The page is this one. Excuse me. So the first option is redeploy with the latest image of the same tag, right? So I'm going to click on this, submit. So it's sending via the webhook this action to the Portainer Docker Swarm environment. And let's see what happens on the service. You see what it did, it did a shutdown on the previous image, and it redeployed this image using the same tag. And you can even notice, to keep me truthful, that it even changed the node. So it went from node 0 to node swarm 1, and it redeployed this image, right? But let's say I want to run, now I want to update this MySQL database to the latest version of the MySQL database container. I can add a variable tag equal latest here. Let's save this. And here on, again, on my webhook example, I can click on submit. And now we check the services, and we will see that it's now going to the, if I click here, it's going to start updating the MySQL database to the latest version. Let's leave a tag here. And it's, let's see what we've done. Unless I did something wrong. I should update this to, let's see, where are the logs? Oh, here. Logs. It should update this to version 8. So this is a good example of how you can use webhooks integrated with Portainer to run several automation or integrations of CI/CD of Portainer in your Docker Swarm environment, right? And as I demonstrated earlier, you can also use pretty much the same integration that Tobias demonstrated to run integration with Git and the Portainer APIs. So for developers or the development environment, this is just pretty much gold, in my opinion. I mean, you have several tools that you can use Portainer with to help you in your development cycle, especially. And it's very well known that Docker and Docker Swarm are used intensively for development purposes of containerized applications. And Portainer can help you considerably with these tools for your development experience, be that by using the integration with Git servers, be that by using the Portainer APIs, or even using the Portainer webhooks. Okay, so anyone? Questions? I have here tons of messages. And Michael, are you there? Busy answering our questions, I see.
I am trying to do that, yes.
Wow, tons of questions. Amazing. I love this audience because you guys come up.
I think we've gotten most of them answered though, Adolfo.
Okay.
Tobias actually helped me out too with a little bit of them, so he had some insight on a few questions too.
If you guys want to participate, please raise your hand and we can include you here in the call, so you can exchange experiences, questions with us. Please, the floor is yours. You can at any moment step in and ask questions or participate if you want. Just raise your hand. I know some people get shy. They go, nah, I don't want to participate, but please feel free. This is not your typical webinar where we only talk and nobody has a chance also to participate. So please feel free. Right. Here I have some questions also coming in the Q&A box. Christoph is asking, to reiterate, the only way to make Portainer pull recent changes to stack deployment from Git repository is to make a Portainer API call. No, not necessarily, Christoph. You can do that via the GUI, as Tobias demonstrated, just by clicking on the deploy or redeploy button. So you can do this via the GUI if you want to, let's say, deploy new changes to your stack via Portainer. You don't have to do it via the API call. Let me share my screen so I can show how this happens again. Okay, so
maybe while you're starting, just an additional comment, there's also a feature Currently work in progress. I think that will allow you to do periodic checks where you're basically pulling every, let's say, 5 minutes to see if something new is coming in, and then you could also use that to get an update.
Yes, exactly. So, well, I don't have any stacks here deployed actually. I only have this. Do you have anything that you can show, Tobias, in terms of redeployment? Can you show that quickly again, please?
Yeah, sure, no
Let me
problem.
stop sharing.
Yeah, I'll go back to my environment and try to find the share button, share my screen, and I hope this should be the right one. And share. So we should be back in Portainer again. And
Yes, we are.
you
Yes, we
can, great, here. Okay, so let's go back to the stacks. I can see here, this is a stack in total control. So this is deployed through Portainer. And if I click on that check, on that stack, I can now enter the authentication information, or if it's anonymous, then I wouldn't need to do that. Enter username and password, hit pull and redeploy, and now it would go into the Git repository, find out what the new version is, pull that down locally, and update the stack.
Yep, perfect, perfect. Thank you, Tobias. Let's see, any more questions? I love these questions, they are amazing. Is there a way to manage deployed tokens? Thomas, I don't think I understand your question properly. What do you mean with deployed tokens, please? Okay. Anonymous. I missed everything except the Q&A because I feel too nervous the time zone. Sorry, that sometimes happens. Are there any web resources you would recommend for learning about what was covered here today? Well, absolutely. We have our online documentation, which is very good, and also our YouTube channel. Those are the two main, I would say, knowledge base tools you can use to apply to everything that we presented here today. So let me actually put up here the
just an FYI, guys, that's exactly what I used to get myself familiar with Portainer. There are several videos out there that do how-tos on different aspects of Portainer by some of the folks from Portainer on just about anything that you could want to do in the Portainer interface. Yep. So just so you know, if you guys want links or whatever, hit me up and I'll send you most of the links that I have.
Thank you, Michael. I'll put this also in the chat for everybody to be able to copy. Let's see. Chat. So this is our documentation page, very extensive and complete, and our YouTube channel. Let's see. Channel. And there are tons of videos that we share with our community here. Oops.
And Adolfo, if I may say, the videos aren't only by our people and everything. It's by like David Burgess and a few others. I've seen quite a few very good videos explaining how to use certain aspects of Portainer. So it's not just by us, but there are several out there.
Tobias, are there any videos that you've prepared here in our channel? I'm sure there should be.
Yeah, I actually did a quick start on creating an Azure VM using traffic and Portainer to get up and running on for the crazy people who want to run this on a Windows workload. So
here I see it in our ambassador.
No, that's the
series.
Ambassador series. That is just talking about what I'm doing and how I'm doing this. But the other one is on how to for creating that stuff.
Yeah. So here we have like tons and tons of videos with several options and for you to consume. And I think we obviously still can't manage to cover everything, but a lot of the very interesting and most important use cases are here. And for anything that you want that is not here, you can always send us a message on our Slack channel. We're also in Discord, aren't we, Michael?
Yeah, we're in Discord, we're on Reddit, we're on Slack, we're also on, we got our Portainer forums where I kind of troll a lot in there as well, try to answer questions. And then of course, here during our webinars.
Absolutely. So there's Thomas, you also asked, thank you, Michael. They would be then stored for a deployment stack.
I just answered that one.
Yeah.
In the chat, I can't find the token, but I'm quite sure I saw work in progress on authentication tokens as well.
Yes, we're working on that, Thomas. So Tobias, thank you for that. Yes, we're working on having them stored in the stacks. Now, I like John Ferrer's question. Does Portainer work with K3S? Okay, so I'm going to tell you, John.
Yeah, I'm answering him right now, Adolfo.
Perfect.
I'm answering that question now.
I'm going to go ahead and also add to your answer, Michael, that I've managed to run Portainer on K3S, KOS, Micro K8s, which is what I'm using now on this demonstration, Minikube, Kind, which is let's say a version, not a version of Minikube, but it's developed by the same community, which is being able to run Kubernetes in a Docker environment. IBM Cloud, Azure AKS, the native Google via GCP, on AWS, on Charm Kubernetes, on Open, on the Red Hat, is that OKD? Yeah, OKD. And Alibaba Cloud. So the interesting thing about Portainer, John, is that we're pretty much agnostic in terms of the Kubernetes version that you would want to manage, right? Because as long as this distribution is, Kubernetes compliant in terms of APIs, we can run anywhere. If your neighbor's bread toaster is running a version of Kubernetes and you want to integrate that with Portainer, the answer is yes, we can run it there also. And I love answering this question because it's not that and it's different from other Kubernetes distributions that they do run, but not necessarily have a good integration with other distributions. Portainer is not specific to a given distribution. We can run on any Kubernetes compliant distribution out there in the market. Okay. Right. So we are 5 minutes from finishing our webinar. Let's see. This has been answered also. George Murphy, will Kubernetes run with Portainer?
Yes.
Yes.
It will.
It will, and it does very well.
Yes, it does.
And not only that, you can not only run Portainer Community Edition, you can also run the Portainer agents. So let me show you quickly
Yeah, I was going to say, Adolfo, could you show them how to do the agents only as well?
Yes, let me open my Portainer. This is my personal Portainer.
And just for some of those questions, sorry, Adolfo,
sure.
Just for some of your questions, guys, I actually physically ran Portainer agent, set it up in different kinds of ways on K3s, micro K8s. I also gave a shot to K8s, but I didn't quite get done with that. But it runs very nicely and it's very stable on those platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Oh, and by the way, Michael, you're also running this on a Raspberry Pi Dramble, right?
Two of my Kubernetes clusters are being run on Raspberry Pi 4s. 3 of my Docker swarms are being run on Raspberry Pi 4. And then I have 2 that are ran on straight Intels.
Yep. So yeah, as you can see, not only we do, someone asked, oh, sorry, Tobias saying he has to go for a call. He has to leave us.
Tobias, thank you very much. I'm
so
glad
much.
you came.
That
Thank
was
you
amazing.
very much.
Thank you very much. You have a
Happy
great
to join. Thanks
day.
a lot, guys. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. It's an honor. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. So we have 3 more minutes. And as you just saw from Michael's answer, we run Portainer. We also support Portainer with the agents or even Portainer natively running on ARM64 architectures, meaning Raspberry Pis. I've also tested Portainer on other ARM64 machines like the Odroid, and it runs perfectly.
Yep.
Very well, actually. It's one of the things I like about Portainer on the ARM64 is that it's as stable. I mean, you can't even tell the difference if you're running Portainer on whatever environment. I once did something very interesting. I did a mixed architecture Kubernetes cluster. So I within running with micro K8s, I integrated 2 x86 machines and 3 ARM64 machines in the same micro K8s cluster. And you may ask, but what's the, why would you want to do that? Well, there's also something quite interesting with Kubernetes that you can do when you add a application is determine via labels or tags where you want this application to run. So for instance, if you want to run in here on placement, which is here, placement rules, you can, for instance, determine if I had ARM64 and AMD64 machines on the same cluster, I would have also the second option of having ARM64 here. And if I want to, for instance, run specific applications that only run on that architecture, or even if I only want to use like the web servers on my ARM machines and the more heavier stuff running on my x86 machines, I can manage that with Portainer using one single interface. So this is something that's also very cool with Portainer in terms of placement rules. You can have multi-architecture clusters running and being managed all via Portainer. And that this, again, not only on the business edition, but also on the community edition, which is the open source one. And someone, just to answer the question of agents, adding an agent here is very easy. All you have to do is go to endpoint, add endpoint. The Docker and the Kubernetes, these two are for if you're running Portainer on a local machine, you're accessing the machine that's running any of these two, because we also run Portainer on Kubernetes. And we have the agent if you want to connect Portainer to a remote environment, which is the case here on my endpoint. So for instance, my Kubernetes machine, or better said, my environment, because it's running more than one node, is running on this subnet. My Docker Swarm is running on this subnet. So I'm using the Portainer agents to connect to these machines. So all you have to do is install the agent and then connect them to the Portainer. On our documentation online, there's extensive and a very detailed information of how this can be done. Here on the install guide, you can go to agents versus Docker, and it'll show you how to deploy Portainer on a machine, or even if you want to connect remotely a machine using the Portainer agent on your environment, be that on Docker Swarm, the same, and the agent here, and Kubernetes, right? Even when you add a endpoint, it'll give you the options and even the commands that you have to run on your endpoints to be able to attach them or integrate them with this Portainer instance. Well, we're up in the hour. I'd like to thank everyone for your participation, for your amazing questions. This has been a great episode. We had the Tobias Fenster showing a real life case of how he uses the Portainer Git integration, Portainer APIs. I also showed the Portainer webhooks that can be used to integrate with a CI/CD tool if required. Michael, thank you so much for your support and help here, and also your sharing your experience of how you use Portainer in your home lab. And we hope to see you on our next episode. That'll be same time next week. Thank thank you very, very, very much. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye. Oh, sorry. Just ask someone else. Is there a recording for the session? Yes, there will be a recording for the session. And now I really say bye-bye. Thank you very much. Bye, Michael. Thank you very much.
See you later, guys. Have a great day.